Echo. Here we echo the African stories. And today I am joined by another phenomenal guest. I'm not going to call him a guest, but I'm going to call him a friend because the work that he does for the community, he's an activist, an advocacy of different social issues in our society. But not only that, Brandon Pillay, he's a former councillor, he's a former MP in our legislature, and now he's an activist that is fighting against gender-based violence, which is one of the really biggest grounds that we have seen and found in our country. Today he's joining us to share his journey and to share with us the perspectives and how we can maybe curb this. Welcome to the show, Mr. Pillay. How are you today?
Very well, thanks, Portia, and thank you so much to African Echo for having me share this morning with you.
We like having people that are generally assisting the community, and your activism, I am so blown away by it. Your activism started during your teen days.
Yeah, actually.
Take us through that one.
I was 17 years old in my final year of school.
Right.
That would have been around 98, but it started from around maybe 97. And I met the late Professor Fatima Mir, then Dr. Ashwin Desai, who is now professor. And they came to Chatsworth because the flat dwellers, as we call them, were experiencing cut-offs of electricity, water, the threat of being evicted. And so they came there. They were actually coming there on a campaign saying to the Indian people that you should not vote for a white party. And they were trying to garner support for the ruling party. But when they arrived, they got shocked to see the living conditions of people in the community. So that is where the activism started. I was first elected the secretary of the Bayview Flats Residents Association. And while I was still 17 and 6 months, I became the chairperson of the Bayview Flats Residents Association.
17.
Yeah, 17 and 6 months. That was 1999, I think it must have been. Yeah, and then ever since, that's just where I've been.
I can imagine a 17-year-old and thinking of assisting other community members. Do they really believe in you?
So I must tell you, Portia, it was kind of like, it was kind of like a whirlwind, because I just felt I was thrown in the deep end without a life jacket, because here I am, the youngest amongst everybody, and I'm suddenly now taking the role of leading them. I mean, as a chairperson, I was the youngest in the entire committee. But I must say that I was surrounded by women that were strong women. And that's what gave rise to many of the things that I've done and evolved and developed. And also being led by a strong woman herself, the late Professor Fatima Mir. So I had all these women around me, very few men, and I must say that nothing has changed 26 years later, because women still seem to be the front line of every community struggle.
Definitely are. And I like the fact that you say women are leading the charge, because in many a times, I mean, in last month we had so many women talking to us, but it's very difficult for them to be in those spaces. But you give them the space.
Absolutely.
You will see the difference.
Absolutely. But I must say, I'm very much saddened, because while women dominate in the spaces of civil society, and activism and fighting the cause, we don't see the same when it comes to giving them leadership positions in government. I mean, you don't see them in leadership positions within political parties. And I think there's always a voice of reason where women are dominated and sort of suppressed when it comes to having to rise. And I just love the conversation I saw over the weekend, where I think it's time for a female president.
It is. It definitely is. Oh, yeah. Well, you had that for the second time or the third time. It's definitely. But, Brandon, I am looking at when you're working in the community, and you're serving in the community, and you are there in Bayview area, not only that, but the entire Chatsworth area knows me very well, because I've spoken to a few of my friends. They're like, oh, we know Brandon. You mean Brandon? I'm like, yes. Oh, we know. So it was eye opening to also see that one come into play. But you know, when you work with people in civil society organizations, they struggle financially, certain constraints that always come and bear the work that you do. But what are some of the maybe highlights of the work that you did or you've done, and you look back and say, I'm humbled by this, but this is exactly why I am in this space?
So I think the first one for me that stands out is when people were facing the threat of being evicted and their services disconnected, like electricity and water, and the fact that we're able to step in and then represent them with the municipality and avoid their services being disconnected. The fact that nobody's been evicted 26 years later, the fact that we now have prepaid electricity and people are able to purchase electricity. So they have water, they have electricity, their flats have been upgraded. But also, for me, it's about how we've impacted lives and how volunteers then went on to be stipended, and some of them have now gotten permanent jobs. And I think, for me, that's how we develop and empower people. But I'm always humbled by the kind of cases that you interact with. And I think there's a few that stands out for me. The very first one will have to be when the first family who was infected by HIV, and this would be some 25 years maybe ago, where the father came through and said, I have to share this with you. And I feel like I have to tell my wife, and there was a baby that was just born. And I have to also tell you that there's a possibility that this baby could also be infected, and the previous child. And at that point, Portia, we were not doing anything around HIV/AIDS education, awareness, etc., etc. We had to then suddenly get into this, get our volunteers to undergo a training program. We had to then get them to do home-based care training. And we had to then start incorporating this because it was the first one. And we had to then now assist this family. Sadly, he passed on. However, the wife and the kids are still around. And they were able to live healthy lives, even through all of this. So that for me tells me that we were doing the right thing. And we had to then see beyond civic duties. We had to see beyond housing issues. We had to start looking at health issues, and we had to start looking at how we assist across the board. And then while I was a councillor, we had an incident of, and I'm sure many people will know about it, the courts refer to it as baby X, but this was the baby Jamie case of a 2-year-old that was abused by the mother and grandmother, and subsequently that child died. And that was one of the most emotional cases having to ever deal with. Going through that entire process of ensuring that she had a dignified funeral, ensuring that she had a memorial, and then going through the whole court proceedings, and even standing and giving testimony in court based on what was happening. And I think it's important that we had to take that cause forward. So those are some of the things that really humbles you when it comes to cases that you face. And sometimes you get emotionally attached. Right. And then you've got to quickly snap out of it and realize that you have to show strength in the midst of emotions.
Yeah, this is very different. It's also very difficult for you as well, because you're also human, and there's so much that's happening in our lives. But let's take it back a bit, Brandon. Now, the Ubuntu, Bayview Ubuntu Community Center.
Yes.
That baby, where did it start? And what were you actually looking to actually achieve?
So here I have to give thanks to Mr. Vivian Reddy, who is also one of my mentors and role models, but a philanthropist of note. I met him around the same time, again under some difficult circumstances. There was a song that was released by Bongani Ngema. Bongani Ngema, yes. And it was starting to stir some racial tensions between the Indian African community.
The title was Amandi.
Thank you. And so we were like, but what is this that you're talking about? Because here in Bayview, in Westcliff, in Chatsworth, in the flatted area, we living next door to each other. And we don't have this thing of racial tension. And we don't see ourselves as different race groups. In fact, we believe that we belong to one race, and that's the human race. And we also always saw ourselves as being united across poverty. And so we then stepped in, and through Professor Fatima Mir, because she had a relationship with him and she knew him, she contacted him, and then she contacted Mr. Reddy, and she said, we are having this rally where we're going to show you what it is, that social cohesion exists, and here in our community of Chatsworth, we live side by side, and there's no need for this. And unfortunately, he was not available to attend on that particular date. So he wrote back and he said, I'm happy to meet you all, but I'm not available on this day. And when he did that, I was most humbled. He came to Bayview, Mr. Reddy. Now, at that time, I just knew there's this billionaire man, and, you know, he comes into Bayview, sits in our small home, in the small lounge, and here we are talking and we're engaging. And I was humbled. I have to tell you this, because I was like, this man who really would not even give people the time of day, I thought, is sitting amongst us, and here he is, reaching out. And it was at that point, and I still remember it was around 1999, that he promised that he will build a skills training center for us in Bayview. And I was chuffed. I was thrilled because, but I was still young, 17. I was like, okay, but, you know, we'd like a community center with the skills training center. And I promise you, Portia, from that year onwards, I have struggled to find land. I have struggled to find the space. But he kept saying from that day onwards that it's there. And every year we'll present to the Sabaya Community Trust that we're still waiting for our center, but the issue was the land. Okay. And so it birthed there. And it was always a vision and a dream that someday we will have our own, very own community center. And the community center will be a one-stop shop, an all-purpose center that takes care of all the issues that we face, that we have a space to be able to work from, that we'll be able to run a soup kitchen, that we'll be able to run the skills training center. But more than that, we will have a women's shelter where we will take care of, I call them survivors, many people call them victims, but survivors of gender-based violence, and having to house them, but also to reintegrate them into society. So that's the Bayview Ubuntu Community Center. It was birthed out of that, and it took a long time. And I must tell you that I have a very strong belief in God, and it was only God that made it possible. While many bad things happened during COVID and lockdown, we were blessed with a space. So there was a Samaritan Center. It was called the Samaritan Center that housed elderly people. And during COVID, they closed down and they rehoused them. And that place was vacant. We made a representation to the organization that was running it and said, please let us take over, because they have a lease with the municipality. Okay. Lo and behold, the place then got vandalized, and then we took over, and then they substituted the lease, ceded the lease, from the municipality. And so now we've taken over the space, and then we demolished and built from scratch. And now we have the Bayview Ubuntu Community Center situated in Bayview.
Look at that. Yeah. Look at that. And in many times, Brandon, when we think and look around us, we're always thinking there's a vulnerable groups, but you are calling them the survivors,
Yes.
which is a brilliant word, because right now I want us to look into the challenges. You talk about the challenges of shelter. You talk very strongly about the need for safety and protection for women, for young kids. What are some of the challenges that you ran into? Because when you talk about community, I mean, we come from different backgrounds.
Yes.
That's the first and foremost. But also, not everything is in your power. You have to knock on different doors.
Yes.
What was some of the challenges that you faced?
So Portia, a very recent incident occurred, and I think that's what just sparked more of the vibe and more of the strength to want to be able to deliver this quickly. So a few months ago, there was an incident of where a 12-year-old was sexually molested. And during the bail application, the station commander at the Bayview SAPS was saying to the magistrate how on the day that the child and mother had to be placed somewhere, they were not able to find a suitable shelter or place of safety that night. And that the child and mother was then forced to come back to the home while there was a little bit of tension in the community, because there was a group supporting and there was a group against.
Right.
And that particular bail proceedings revealed that there was no space. The only space that they could find was somewhere far away, and the other one had an outbreak of a particular foot and mouth disease, and they was not able to house them. And so it just then brought to light the cry that we've been having for the longest time. In Chatsworth, there is one shelter. However, it's not taking any women anymore, because I think they've maxed out. And they were actually taking very few. It may have closed down, I don't know, but from our last interaction, there isn't. So around the south, there isn't anything. And if you had to find the nearest one, it would be in Phoenix, which is in the north of Chatsworth. And it's difficult, because if the mother is working and that's the only source of income, it means that she's not going to be able to travel from there. So there isn't that. And I think the biggest challenge is that there isn't the space. The other challenge you have is that some shelters will take you only as a woman and not take your kids with you. And for us, what then happens to your children in the time that you have to be assisted? Yes. So we're looking at a more holistic approach in terms of having a shelter that says you can be able to take care of your kids with yourself, a short term and a long term, because there are some people who may not be able to go back home after 2 days. There are some people who may not be able to go back after a week. There may be some people that have nowhere else to go because the only home they have is with an abuser. And so you have to be able to then provide something long-term to then be able to reintegrate them. And so that for me is one of the challenges. And then the other challenge that we find, and I often say this because I'm never afraid to say it, is that you find yourself being abused, and then you go to law enforcement or agencies and you get secondary abuse. Because somebody talks to you in the midst of other people and humiliates you. Or they're not able to assist you immediately and they've got to give you the runaround. And so it's important for us to understand that when someone goes through this primary abuse, you must not be a secondary abuser.
So the system itself, it needs to be re-looked into.
Absolutely, absolutely. However, I must say that with the TCC, you are able to incorporate that because everything is there. But what we have, which is more exciting, is what we call the RRT. It's the Rapid Response Team through the KZN network. And so Cookie Edwards is an incredible woman. She's running that. And so we now have rapid response teams across the province. And we are setting up the rapid response team for Chatsworth. Okay. And I'm spearheading that.
Oh, I'd like to see more of that, because if you look at the amount, just last month, the amount, the people, the numbers that the women that were abused, who it's deafening, and it's also discouraging, because these people are abused by people that they know very well.
In most cases.
Where does this leave us? But let's take this on the next segment. Do join us on the next one. We'll be back with more. You are still with the African Echo podcast, and I'm still with the phenomenal Brandon Pillay. He has so many hats, but right now we're talking about the activism on the gender-based violence, which is the biggest crime in our country right now.